Today on Spotlight Now, we focus on the University of Hawaii with President David Lassner and UH Athletics Director Craig Angeles.
And joining us a little later in the show, a multiple-time Olympian, local boy Micah Christenson, fresh off his Paris Olympic appearance. Spotlight Now starts now.
You're watching Spotlight Now with Ryan Kalei-Suji and Yunji Denise on Hawaii News Now. Have questions or comments for our guests? Join the conversation in our Facebook live stream. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Hello, and thanks for tuning in here to Spotlight Now on Hawaii News Now here on this busy Tuesday. A lot going on here, but today we are going to be focusing in on the University of Hawaii. And before we begin our conversation, of course, we want to encourage all of you watching to engage in the conversation and participate with our guests. You can enter your comments and questions on the Facebook comment section of our Facebook page at Hawaii News Now, or by scanning this QR code that you see at the bottom of your screen.
Yeah, we love the engagement, and we know that you've got a lot of questions for our first guest. We want to welcome in University of Hawaii President David Lassner. David, thank you so much for being here.
A pleasure to be here.
So you've got, what are we looking at, 5 months left? Is that about right?
A little less,
5 months left. How does it feel to be, we know school starts next week, so it's an exciting time on campus. Move-in time, but at the same time, I'm sure you're projecting out a few months and kind of thinking about the next phase for you.
Yeah, I'm really excited. It's been an amazing run for me. I came here on a 1-year half-time contract as a graduate student in 1977, and I never left Hawaii, and I've never had an employer other than the University of Hawaii. So yeah, it's a pretty big change, but I'm looking forward to next phase of life.
Let's kind of get into some of the issues and things that you are still dealing with. Of course, heading into this next school year and each legislative session, there's always discussion about the UH budget. You're constantly having to go down to the state legislature to defend your budget. What were your thoughts and assessments of this overall past legislative session and their support for higher education here in the state of Hawaii?
We made some progress last session, especially on the operating budget side. Some disappointments. The House was more gracious to the university than the Senate, not a big surprise. But we got a couple things done that we had really been focused on for the last few years. On the capital improvement side, less success, more disappointment. So that's the investment in our facilities that we really want to keep up first rate for our students and faculty. But we got more of our operating budget restored, from the pandemic cuts. We still are struggling to try to get more scholarship money for students.
When you make the pitch to lawmakers, and I've heard you talk about this before, about why the university is such a good investment of public resources. Tell us a little bit about that.
That's because you're such a great MC for our UH events.
Well, I'm interested to know, especially because the public often sees a lot of tension that comes out of lawmakers and a lot of folks, trying to make sure that public money is being spent in the right way. And that is their job. But why is this a good investment?
Yeah, there's a couple things going on. First, I think students. So investment in a college education is probably the single best investment that students and their families can make toward a better future. The last UHERO study, the estimates are over $2 million in lifetime earnings additional for a bachelor's degree from the University of Hawaii. Almost that much for an AS, an Associate of Science degree. Those tend to be in the applied trades. So now you compare that to the cost of education. We've done an incredible job containing our costs. A lot of that is our structure. We're pretty streamlined nowadays. So most of our students graduate without any debt at all. In spite of the national news that you hear about crushing student debt, it's something like a third of our UH Manoa students, our most expensive campus, graduate with debt, and that number is in the range of $25,000. If you have any debt at all. So now we're looking at, okay, maybe I have $25,000 of debt, first new car probably, and millions of dollars of additional lifetime earnings. But in addition, college graduates are healthier, they live longer, they vote more, they volunteer more, they engage more in the community, less likely to draw on social services, less likely to lose their job in a recession, get their job back faster after a recession. And these are intergenerational effects because their children are also then more likely to go to college as well. So that's why it's an amazing investment for students and their families, but all of these other things are amazing investments in our community. And these are the people who end up being our teachers, our doctors, our nurses, our radiation technologists, our business people. Those are UH graduates.
You know, when you talk about this, I think a lot of people often will just think about UH Manoa, but this is a statewide program that spans over multiple islands with various colleges and campuses. When you look at prioritizing projects and you're looking at CIP money that needs to go places or having to prioritize that, how do you decide what the priorities are, knowing that you have this vast array of campuses and community colleges that equally need support when oftentimes it may appear that UH Manoa is the one that gets everything?
Yeah, and that's not true. I think the people at UH Manoa would say exactly the opposite, that they feel like the other campuses get more attention because they have legislators who are dedicated to their district. Whereas UH Manoa is really a one of a kind for the entire state. But that aside, our process is pretty unique here. Like University of California just gets a pile of money. Here, our appropriations come partitioned by UH Manoa, UH Hilo, UH West Oahu, UH community colleges, and the UH system. So we, while we have the authority to move some money between units, we generally don't do that. We try to follow the legislative intent for those appropriations. I think what I'd say is, going back 10, 15 years ago, UH Manoa was by far the most neglected campus, highest deferred maintenance backlog by far. It just didn't even look good. And I think we've really turned that around. And a lot of that is, it's great management, but it's also much better support from the legislature in some of the years.
Outside of legislative support, UH just got a record $615 million in funding, extramural funding. Tell us a little bit about where that money goes and how you were able to raise at that level. I know the last 3 years, the university has done quite well.
3 records in a row.
Yeah.
We broke $500 million for the first time 3 years ago. Little over 500,000, and we jumped almost 100 million this fiscal year. So really remarkable. Most of that work is done by our faculty. We've been pretty strategic in our faculty hires over the past few years. Most of that is at Manoa, but certainly not all of it. Community colleges did really well during the time of the pandemic, bringing in money to help with retraining. And to Ryan's point, our different campuses have different missions. Our community colleges are primarily focused on educating people either for transfer to a university or directly to go into a job that requires a set of skills. And they've really leaned into that second part around workforce development as we watched the need for transition through the pandemic. So that money, that $615 million, goes to all the islands. Even if UH Manoa brings it in, UH Manoa has like agricultural research stations, astronomy, on every island, and then some of that money is going directly into like UH Hilo, Maui College, and others. So our estimate is about 10,000 jobs are directly supported by all of that money coming into the state. And those tend to be really good jobs. So it's a large economic sector. Vice President Sirmos noted our extramural enterprise as an economic sector is bigger than agriculture in the state of Hawaii.
Yeah. You'd spoken about some of the improvements that have been made to UH Manoa. One of the areas, though, that made headlines this past legislative session was the conditions of some of the living quarters and the dorms that are stationed there at UH Manoa. It came up again.
We say student housing.
Student housing, excuse me, student housing. And it also came up as a point of contention with some of the Board of Regents during that process. What can you tell us about where that stands right now and some of the progress that maybe has been made or some of the work that's still left to be done?
Yeah, thanks. So historically, student housing was expected to generate its own revenue to support its renovations and upkeep. And we didn't see that happening. The rates were kept pretty low, which is great for students, except then you don't have money to really maintain the facilities. I was pretty concerned about this and put in a new management structure for student housing right before the Regents got really interested in this. So our new management team is looking at it, including doing some financial analyses. We've done a few things to get ready for the new academic year. One of the things we're doing differently is we're not expecting them to run everything as if they're a separate company within the University of Hawaii. So like our maintenance people will help with maintenance. Our groundskeepers can help with groundskeeping. Just financial planning, some basic skills where really student housing was left on its own, and that's what we've changed, and we've brought them into the campus at large. So some minor improvements for this year, over the last year, for this year. We still have work to do, and the money to really fix them up has to come from somewhere. So the legislature did not support the request that the Regents put in last year. We did not get funding for student housing at all, in spite of the many conversations about it. And we did put in a substantial request. So now we're looking at, well, how much can we raise generate by raising rates? And we have 2 new student residences coming up now. One just opened last year, the RISE facility that I think you're both familiar with. That was not done with public funding. That's financed privately, using the student fees to live in the building are supporting the construction bonds. And the second one coming up now next to the East-West Center is also being built through a public-private partnership. So we're trying to, it's one of the things we've done over the past 10 or so years is develop the capacity to do things in different ways. So we are not relying solely on legislative appropriations and tuition, which are our 2 major sources of funding, but we're also diversifying into some of these other activities as well.
You mentioned that you came to UH, in a singular capacity, and obviously have transitioned into very different jobs.
I'm an IT guy.
Yeah. And for people who don't remember, when you came at the helm of the University of Hawaii, the university was in great turmoil, at least in terms of a leadership standpoint. What has it been like for you, to take it over, to right the ship? Because when I see you out and about, it seems like you actually really enjoy this work.
I never expected to have this job. Honestly, when I was in charge of IT, I was the first vice president for IT and chief information officer for the UH system. I thought I had the best job in the world. I loved IT, I love the university, I love higher education, and I live in the best place on earth. What could be better? But when the Regents asked me to step in, and originally I was only going to be interim president for like a year, and they asked me to be considered for the non-interim job. I never say permanent in this business, but and really what I thought, it wasn't that I wanted to be president desperately. I just thought, this institution has been so good to me my whole career, and it's so important to Hawaii. If the Board of Regents thinks I'm the best person to lead it, then I need to do that. I need to lean in. And I do love my job. And I'm also ready to not work this hard.
You love your job, even though if it comes at points of criticism, I will say. You have made headlines as well with some members of the Senate vocally and publicly coming out against you and your leadership. How much of that played into your decision that this was your time? Or how have you navigated the relationships with lawmakers who openly criticize maybe some of the things that are happening at UH?
Yeah, so first, absolutely not. My conversation with my board chair and my 2 board chairs ago was Randy Moore, and we talked about my plans, and this was probably 2022 before any of that came out, and I told him, I said, 2024, I don't want to work past that. I turned 70 this year, so I will, and I just think that's enough. Ready to turn it over to someone else. It'll be 11 years. It's a good run. So, I feel it's super interesting because the headlines are always about, 3 senators critiquing me pretty hard. I feel great support from the House. I feel great support from the last 2 governors. I feel great support from many senators, but that's not what the headlines are. And unfortunately for me and the university, a couple of those senators, or those 3, are pretty powerful in the Senate. So it does shape some of the relationship, but that's not, that didn't drive my decision at all. And I think they have been tough on the university, multiple university leaders, not just me.
Right, and how do you feel about the keys that you receive versus those that you're handing over? The university that when the university was given to you versus the one that you're giving to the next president?
Yeah, there are
What's
some
the
interesting.
difference?
I mean, and I was a big fan of my predecessor, Marcy Greenwood. I worked for her for. She was in the job for 4 years. I was her vice president of IT. We talked a lot and did many wonderful things together. But I'm a different person. I have a different style, and I had the benefit of watching. For me, it was probably the last 3 presidents that I paid pretty close attention to: Evan Dobell, David McLean, and Marcy Greenwood. And I could say these are the things that these 3 individuals have done that I can follow, model, and these are things that all 3 of them did that it's not really me and it's not going to work for me. So, I mean, I think objectively the university is in a better place right now. We're financially healthy. We've got good reserves on all of our student metrics. Almost everything's improving. I think our, other than with, 3 prominent senators, I think our reputation in the community is pretty excellent. I'll just say walking down the street, shopping in a Times, at an athletic event, people just thank me. I think they're very happy with the condition of the university. What I remember is when I first took the job, and I would open a newspaper every day, and if there was a headline about the university, I dreaded reading the story because it was not going to be good news. And now, I mean, our bad news gets covered fairly, but it's not, the media are not full of bad stories about UH. And, I think that's reflected in community sentiment as well. And they want to love their university, and we just need to help them.
When you came into this role, if you can talk about just this transition now, because you're in a unique position where you were the president of the campus, but you're also overseeing UH Manoa. Moving forward, do you think that this will be the model staying forward, rather than having a chancellor that oversees UH Manoa and just a president overseeing all campuses? Or do you think it's this dual role that you serve right now?
So the board seems inclined to want to separate the roles again. I haven't actually seen the rationale for that, but it's certainly their purview. I was hired as head of the system, and what I realized at the time when I assumed the dual role was that since 2001, I think I have this right, I was the 4th president and I think the 6th or 7th chancellor since 2001 alone. It just has not been a stable structure for UH. So I went back and looked at the data. So UH founded in 1907, kind of became a system 60s-ish. The role was separated in 72. Until then, the president was the head of the system and Manoa. And then Manoa went through about, I want to say 5 chancellors in the next 8 or 9, 10 years. Then the next 2 presidents did both. They lasted 8, 9 years. Then they separated them, and we went into this period. So I get the logic of why it's 2 separate jobs, but objectively, it has never worked for the University of Hawaii. And there are models that work both ways. My personal belief is it's better combined, but I'm not the person who will make that decision after I'm gone.
One of the things that was a challenge during your tenure, of course, was TMT and the fight over Mauna Kea. I'm interested now, as you reflect on that, how you feel the university handled that, and that issue is still not really resolved.
No.
What your thoughts on what should happen going forward?
Yeah, so I would say I probably didn't move quickly enough when I first became president at addressing some of the issues around the stewardship of Mauna Kea. I will say I'm incredibly proud of our stewardship program now. And I think, the law that was passed establishing the Mauna Kea Stewardship and Oversight Authority, we are working with them as best we can to transition our responsibilities over to this new commission that was established. And we are handing over a first-rate program, as good as anything could be. We have consolidated all of the stewardship in Hilo, which was an intent established in around 2000, but it did not get done until we pulled it off, 6, 7 years ago. We managed to do it. We have a great program, education, the Rangers program, conservation, invasive species control, monitoring of archaeological sites. The one thing that is not resolved is how many telescopes can be up there. And I think the next organization will have to figure that out. Personally, I think astronomy on Mauna Kea is a compatible use, consistent, and appropriate, but clearly others completely disagree.
Another thing that we know that you are very passionate about is athletics, and we're going to be talking to Craig Angeles, the athletic director for UH Manoa, right after this. But wanted to get your take on where the athletic department is in these ever-changing times of college athletics with the transfer portal, with NIL, also with the stadium up in limbo right now with UH Manoa. Your thoughts on the state of the athletic program at Manoa?
I mean, our student athletes in our programs are doing an amazing job, surrounded by an incredible amount of turmoil that we have no control over. So the stadium is a really big deal. We're really counting on the stadium authority to get a contract issued, hopefully in a timely manner. And I think the first game is against Kansas in 2028. I'm ready to buy tickets in August 2028. And I think it's possible to make that deadline, but it's going to take a lot of work to really get that done. That's a huge impact on the football program, but the football program generates the revenue that supports most of our non-revenue sports as well. The other really big external influence that's a challenge is, as you mentioned, and it's a lot more than it started with NIL and the transfer portal, which a lot about, but that basically turned every student athlete anywhere in the country into a free agent. My opinion is higher education, presidents, boards brought this on ourselves by not controlling coaches' salaries. That at the point when places like Alabama thought it was okay to pay Nick Saban $10 million a year, and when football coaches are getting paid off $70-80 million to be fired for not winning enough. Meanwhile, all of the work that's visible on TV is being done, and these are mostly white guys, and the work is being done by mostly Black and Hispanic athletes. It was not a good look. And I think that's what resulted in the basically both legislative and judicial decisions saying this is not fair. Why can the coaches get up and go to make $50 million at the drop of a hat, but we have student athletes locked in? And now we're navigating this incredible world of free agency. I think our coaches are doing a great job of managing the transfer portal, which is bi-directional, right? You lose people, but you can gain people, and you can gain great players who aren't getting the playing time they want, perhaps, because they're at a Power 4 school that doesn't need all of the talent that they have, and we can start them.
That's an interesting way to look at it. We are almost out of time, but before we let you go, you mentioned that you're 70, you've only ever worked for UH, but I cannot imagine an intellectually curious person like yourself is just going to go hang out at the beach, maybe for a little while, but not indefinitely. So what's next personally?
Yeah, so when I didn't have an agent or a lawyer negotiating for me, so my arrangement with the university is I've basically become a free president emeritus, able to do volunteer work for no money for the university. So I have a couple of projects I've been involved with, IT related, from before I was president, that I can continue to help with, and will transition on to next gen people. So that's a lot of fun for me around supercomputing, disaster management, high-speed data networks, things I will find out if I still know anything about. I plan to travel a lot more. So my goal is to go somewhere far away without a laptop, which I have not done since I took this job. And I have a bucket list that I will work my way through slowly. And I've been asked to do some volunteer work in the community. So I have a lot of passion around conservation issues, not something I'd had time for, but I've been asked about joining a few boards, and I'm putting all of that off until after I'm gone. So no, you will see me around the community, I think.
Fantastic. Well, we appreciate you being here today. We're going to be catching up with Craig Angeles after the break. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
just look at you all the whole time.
Welcome back to Spotlight Now here on Hawaii News. Now we're continuing on in our conversations, focusing in on the University of Hawaii, and joining us now is Athletics Director Craig Angeles. Thank you so much for joining us here and being with us this afternoon. Let's first start off. You've been now on the job for about a year now.
Yes.
What has this first year been like, and what are some of the things that you've learned already about living in Hawaii?
It's been a great first year. I mean, it's been difficult to try to figure out the lay of the land and landscape, get to know everybody. So the approach has been to come in and try to listen and learn and figure things out. And so that's been very beneficial because it is a very unique place. I mean, every place is unique, but I think everyone would agree that Hawaii is probably more unique than others. So, I think the athletic department was left in really good shape. There's a lot of good things going on there, a lot of good coaches. I mean, we won 6 conference championships last year, and of course it wasn't due to me. The coaches were already in place, but I mean, it just goes to show you that there's a really good nucleus of talent and people here, and it's going in the right direction. Certainly we can get better in some other areas, but it's really been a good first year, being able to balance the budget, win some championships. But there's, as we'll talk about further, there's a lot of things out there in college athletics you got to navigate these days.
Yeah, it is a complicated landscape, and one of the things that a lot of people are watching, of course, is where the UH football team plays. How have you felt about playing on campus, and what are the conversations right now around Aloha Stadium that you've been involved with?
Yeah, it's a very unique place to play. I mean, it's 15,000 seat arena. It's probably the smallest arena in all of the 133 FBS schools, smallest stadium, I should say. But it's functionable. We're going to be playing UCLA on national television, the national television, all the way across the country, national television, in 2 weeks. So it's serviceable. But yeah, I think we're all looking forward to the next generation. I mean, we'll end up, if we can get into that new Aloha Stadium project by 2028, we'll have played in our smaller temporary stadium for 7 years, which is a lifetime in people's careers. But the idea is to stay with, behind this project, and hopefully it will work. I know that they're going to, in September, first part of September, select the developer that will go forward with this project, and then they'll have 9 months to try to strike a deal with them to see if this is something that can happen. So the next 9 months will be crucial, because if they can strike a deal that this will happen with this developer, then we'll be off to the races, and they'll be able to build that stadium and be able to play Kansas in the fall of 2028. So I'm really hoping that Halava project will work out, because that allows us to do a lot of other things on our campus. And I'm very positive about it, but, it's a tough and intricate process. So we'll see.
With that being said, and now looking at where you folks are here on campus playing in that stadium, what are some of the enhancements that have made already just in this first year, and what can fans expect this weekend with some of the upgrades that you guys are doing to look to enhance the overall fan experience?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, the questions always come, how much do we put into that temporary stadium, knowing that we're going to move into another one day? But we still want to enhance it while we can. Last year we brought over the Aloha Stadium scoreboard, which was really nice. There's certain things we're not probably able to do, like the seating situation. I've gone up there and sat there myself. I mean, it's very tight, and sitting on benches is hard to do. So some of those things can't change. But there's smaller things, like we're going to have, our concessions is going to be upgraded this year. We're actually going to have people walking through the stands, as they call them, hawkers, to actually, so that people don't have to pry themselves out of their seats, so they can actually buy concessions. We're working on a new sound system, or enhanced sound system. We resurfaced the field a little bit to make it a little bit more functionable, playable. And so there's some things that we've done along the way to enhance it, and we continue to get surveys from our fans and to try to see what we can improve and what we can't. But right now we're not doing a lot of major improvements, like on the seating levels and things like that. We're going to wait to see what our next path will be. But it should be a good environment. It's great team out there, and I think we're going to have very, very much success, a lot of success this year.
Yeah, David Lassner says he's ready to buy those 2028 tickets now, if they were to
We're
go
very
on sale.
optimistic, yes.
Knowing that, I'm just interested to know what your involvement or the involvement of the university is with the Aloha Stadium planning. We know this is a multi-million-dollar public works project, but since you will be one of the primary tenants, I would imagine that they want to get your input. Have you been able to tell them the kinds of things that you need, and what are those conversations like?
Yeah. We've been involved in it from the beginning. I've been involved with it since I've been here. They have we've met with the Stadium Authority, and they've have provided all the specs to the developer, like if you take over this project, this is what we expect. And so we were able to be on the front end with the Stadium Authority to design what we would like to have in there, and more importantly, the revenue share, the financials, those kind of things is what we all kind of agreed to as a template, and then we give it to the developers, and then developers have to see, from there where they want to go from there. But it's very complicated, as you know. It's a $400 million stadium that the state is paid for, which is fantastic because most places have to raise money and take out debt. I mean, the big one at San Diego State that they just built, Snapdragon, I think their debt service is around $20 million a year. So that means they have to generate a lot of revenue just to pay off their debt service. And the fortunate thing, if we can get this going, is we won't have to pay rent in it to play, and we won't have to pay debt service to get it up. And so those are two big things that no other school in the country has the benefit of doing. So that's why I'm really hopeful that it will get done. But yeah, we've been involved in the beginning of what we want the specs to be and whatnot. But then the next place it will go is to the developers, and then we'll probably have to negotiate with them once they start getting down to the nitty gritty. But right now it's designed to be like a 25,000 seat stadium, a little less than I'd probably like. I'd rather have maybe a 30,000 seat stadium, but 25 would be fine too, and with all the amenities and whatnot. So we've been involved with it from the beginning, and then I'm on a subcommittee of the NASET, as they call it, New Aloha Stadium and Entertainment District, and we have monthly meetings there too, where we are able to have some input on that. So we've got a seat at the table. Still a little early. Once they select a developer and they start, and they agree to do it and go forward, then we'll probably insert ourselves even a little bit more. But it's been a good process so far.
Let's spend some time talking a little bit about just the finances of an athletic department here at the University of Hawaii and in the state of Hawaii, some of the challenges and the unique challenges that I'm sure you've become very familiar with now, being a year in the job. What are some of the challenges that you're seeing here with just the financial structure of UH? Because when you look at the history of the athletic program, it constantly being in the red, having to seek support from the legislature, just that ongoing process, in addition to just all managing your sports and your coaches and athletes, you have this whole financial and fiscal side of it. What are some of the things that you've learned through this past year and that you're hoping for to really change during your time here?
Well, you mentioned the finances, and that's probably the number one concern for any AD in the country, because there's just not enough money there, and the costs of doing business go up so greatly. You mentioned the legislature. We're very fortunate to have legislative support. Many states don't allow the legislature to support athletic programs. Florida is a good example of that, and California and others. But we have that opportunity. So they've really been influential in helping us as Hawaii's team. I mean, we are Hawaii's team. We're the only Division I school here and no pro sports team and whatnot. So everyone kind of rallies around us, which has been very good. But yeah, I think that, not getting too much in detail for some of your listeners, I mean, our budget's about $53 million is going into next year. Every year it will go up about $2.5 to $3 million just to stay status quo with the increase in union salaries and benefits and some other things. So just to even stay status quo, it's going to go up at $2.5 to $3 million every year. So we're always chasing that nut just to stay status quo. But now you layer on top of, for some of your listeners who may follow college athletics, the House settlement where the NCAA settled a suit for $2.8 billion. And so every school has to help fund that settlement. The bigger schools will put in more, but our contribution is about $500,000 every year that we need to do that for 10 years. So you have that money that's being taken away from you. Then you also have with this House settlement that there's no more scholarship limits. Football used to have a scholarship limit of 85. They just are changing the scholarship limits because they say they violate antitrust laws to now roster size limits. So now the roster size will be 105 people. So you can scholarship someone all the way up to 105 scholarships. So that's 20 more scholarships in football. And you do that with all the sports. We just did that calculation. And it's about 197 more scholarships. We're already fully funded with all our 21 sports already at the NCAA limits. Now, going up to these roster limits, it'll be 197 more scholarships at the tune of about $40,000 a scholarship, which is going to be to the tune of about another $12 or $13 million a year on top of what we're already paying for scholarships. And so, who's going to be able to do that? And then it's also the House settlement allows for revenue share. We can revenue share up to, I think it's about 22% of certain, so maybe up to $20 million, we can revenue share with our student athletes also. So, and then you have the NIL, which is name, image, and likeness, funds that are outside of athletics that people are contributing to also. And so there's all these expenses out there now, and the money is kind of staying the same. And so the question is how do you monetize more, and how much can you get into the game? So that's the hardest part about being an athletic director, bar none, is trying to make the finances work. And I'll say one last thing. The multimedia rights deals that conferences get is very much of a disparity that drives that too. Like the SEC, I think, is getting, and Big Ten maybe gets $70 to $80 million per school per year, which is going up to maybe 90. And even if you just say it's 70 million, for those two conferences, the next two conferences, the Big 12 and the ACC, are around, like, say, 40 million. And then the American and the Mountain West, which we're in, are like 7 and 5, I believe. And so on an aggregate basis, 70 million after 2 years is 140. After 3 years, it's 210, versus $5 million. The next year it's aggregates 10 million, next it's 15. So you just see you got 133 teams in the FBS, but you just see them scattered just really across the spectrum. And so that's what we're trying to figure out, is how we can get better in that space.
Yeah, and part of what also can contribute to that scatter, if you will, is what David Lassner was talking about, and what you just mentioned, that every student is essentially a free agent at this point. What has it been like to manage that change? And how are you engaging and advising these student athletes as they sort of enter this strange world of now making money on top of going to school?
Yeah. They used to just go to school and do homework and practice and maybe, have a social life. But now this whole opportunity to make money and to be entrepreneurs in this space is really created more conflict for them, if you will. But it's been good. We've got to embrace it. But the way that name, image, and likeness thing has worked is some people are able to go out and do local deals and things like that and monetize themselves, and then others are able to dip into what they call a collective, where money's put into a big pool of money by a big pot of money by donors, and then they're paid monthly, almost like a salary cap, almost like the pros. So if you're really good, you could get paid $100,000 a year, or if you're really good in some of the other schools, you could get paid $1 million a year.
At like 19.
So this is the first generation that's going to have to take a pay cut many times when they leave college.
Wow.
It's really changed the game, and then of course people can be free agents. There's no regulatory basis for any of that, like there is, at least in the pro leagues. They regulate a lot of this stuff. This is unregulated. People can go in the portal, they can transfer, they can transfer for more money at another school. And so, if we face that challenge at Hawaii, that our great players will very much could get picked off by people who are paying them more. So we might be paying them through our efforts, I don't know, $5,000 a month. But someone else in these power leagues and whatnot will be paying them $100,000 or $500,000 or $1 million. So we're always going to be fighting that battle of being picked off by the bigger schools. So we have to hopefully create value in other ways that people want to stay here with the island and the weather and the people and some of the things we're doing there. So it's a battle of how do we get good players and how to retain good players and then still be competitive, in the marketplace.
As you continue to navigate this, and as you enter this athletic season coming up that starts again this weekend with the University of Hawaii football team with their season opener, what are some of your hopes for this athletic season for not only the football team but just the overall season? Any specific goals or things that you're encouraging your coaching staff and athletes as you enter this time?
Well, granted, what the public sees is just winning and losing, but there's a whole student athlete experience behind that, to make sure they have enough food, the academic support, the tutoring, mental health aspect of things, people that are kind and generous and are there to help them, like any parent would want their child to receive in college, and help them have a good holistic experience. So that's what we're all about. But winning really helps you have a good experience, right? And so having said that, my goal is that football will do well. Football is the bread and butter in Hawaii. It's the bread and butter at UH. We need to be good in football, and we need to be good, in this changing landscape too. Helps with recruitment, helps with retention, helps with conference realignment, helps with everything. So I think that's our linchpin. We need to get back to being really good in football. And I think this year I'm optimistic. Timmy's got a good group of people in there. He feels really good about it. Because keep in mind, when he left, or when he got here, there was 19 starters that left, and many of them went to Power 4 and started at Power 4 positions too. So he's had to rebuild some of that great talent. I think they've done that. We're going to charter this year. It was the first time they've chartered in a while, charter back and forth, and that'll help too, because when you don't charter and you go commercial, you have to go out early, spend a lot of money in hotels and food and buses and everything, but also you don't come back until Sunday afternoon or Sunday night. And everybody on the mainland and everybody in FBS charters back and forth. And so 2 hours after the game is over, their wheels are up and they're on their way home. And so they've got the whole Sunday to recuperate. And so I think that'll help, because they'll be able to get home on late right after the game, have all day Sunday, and then also they won't have to leave so early in the week too. So they'll have a better work week, if you will. So I think that'll be helpful for them. And so I think, our schedule's been softened a little bit. So I think we're in a good position to have a really good year. And I'm very optimistic. We've got to go at least 7-5 to be in a bowl game, and that's my goal. And I think we can do it.
We're almost out of time. Just want to ask you your pitch to the fans this season. Why should they come out and see these games in person? What's so special about being there when you're in person?
I think it's about relating to the players and being part of a movement. I mean, everyone loves football in Hawaii, and just because our stadium's a little smaller and whatnot, we still need you to come out and support. I mean, we need to sell out that UCLA game. We need to sell out every game, but we got to be able to show the world that we can sell out the UCLA game. So I'm hoping that they'll kind of overlook the stadium size and some of the amenities and come out and really support these young men.
Okay, thank you so much for being here. We are going to be talking with an Olympian after the break. Stay with us.
What is Hawaii's soul?
It's the way we exist with all living things. The aina, the ocean, the sky, the kanaka, who originated from the islands.
And everyone who calls Hawaii home.
It's all of us living with island consciousness.
It's understanding that the past is in front of us, so that everyone can follow the kupuna
that came before us.
It's our shared kuleana to take care of these islands.
And each other, because we belong to Hawaii.
We are Ko Hawaii.
Spotlight now with Yunji Denise and Ryan Kalei-Suji. Connecting you with newsmakers from throughout our islands. Going in depth with Hawaii's leaders and taking your questions live. Spotlight now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Hello and welcome back here to Spotlight. Now we have a very special guest joining us here live in our studios, fresh off his appearance with Team USA in the Paris Olympic Games. Kamehameha alum, three-time Olympian Micah Christenson. Welcome home. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
A lot to talk about and digest. We want to first just talk about this Olympic experience. How was Paris?
It was amazing. Like, Paris did an incredible job. It was an Olympics where I got to bring my whole family there, along with some extended family as well. And they had an incredible time, not only going to our games and being able to see the environment, but also seeing Paris. We as athletes got to see Paris a little bit. So it was a really special Olympics.
How does it compare? We know that you've played in Olympic Games in the past. How did this Games compare to those?
It was, let's say, my first traditional Olympic experience, to where in Rio 8 years ago, we didn't stay in the village, in the Olympic Village. We stayed in a hotel because it would have been an hour and a half commute from the village to the venue. So we elected to stay in a hotel. In Tokyo, it was obviously riddled with the COVID stuff, and so we could not leave the village. It was, we just was village and gym, village gym. And so this one, we had the opportunity to go see our families, go and sightsee, maybe watch some other games. I got to go to a rugby match, not an American one, but a rugby match nonetheless. It was really cool to see different environments.
You know, talk a little bit about the Olympic Village, because of course we saw all those videos of the cardboard beds. We've heard reports of like the food wasn't great. I mean, what was your take about living in there and the environment and the whole setup?
It's special first and foremost because you're in this like college atmosphere in a community with the best athletes in the world, right? So it's a really special, unique experience. The rooms and the suites, they're nothing to write home about. The cardboard beds, they're not that bad. But, you know, the mattress was, it was, you know, touted as being firm on one side and soft on another, and you turn it over and you get the soft side. I was like, okay, cool. Like, this is really hard. I got to turn it to the soft side. And I flipped the sheets up, and it was already on the soft side. So it wasn't the most comfortable place to sleep, but at the same time, we're all on the same playing field. So that is what it is, and we get to go out there and do it.
Tell us a little bit about game day and how you get yourself mentally prepared for something like that, because I can't imagine, you've played on many stages before in front of the state, perhaps even, larger than that, but to play in front of the world, what is that like, and how do you, stay level and be able to bring your best given that kind of pressure?
Yeah, I mean, something that is really unique about American volleyball, especially men's American volleyball during the Olympics, is that there's so many more American eyes on men's volleyball during the Olympics. So when we go to Europe and we play in all these different countries, volleyball is pretty popular, especially men's volleyball. And so we're on a pretty big stage there. But now with the Olympic spotlight, we are now on this massive stage for all of our friends and family and people that I went to elementary school with that's texting me saying that they saw me on TV. And so it's a special, unique experience. It's something that is, if you let pressure affect you in that regard, it would be quite heavy. But thankfully, we get a lot of practice and a lot of, let's say, mental training with our coaching staff and our team psychologists to be able to be ready for those moments. And I think we did a pretty good job of that.
Well, let's talk about one of those moments where you had to really reshift and refocus really quickly. You guys did well, of course, in pool play, going on and continuing on into those medal rounds, and suffering just that heartbreaking 5-set loss to Poland, having to then turn around and play for the bronze, knowing that your chances of playing for gold were now done. Talk about that transition, and how much time did you guys allow yourselves to really sit in that loss before you had to move on and focus in on that bronze medal match?
Yeah, I think it's, and I've said it before, I think it's the hardest game to play in sport, or at least in, let's say, men's volleyball, right? The bronze medal match at the Olympics, when you're working 4 years to, your goal is gold. At least that was ours. And it was as if our goal passed away. And so we had to sit in it and grieve a little bit, take that time. And it's so hard. Like, we, as a team, we took that evening, we took that morning, the next morning to have a meeting the next morning, air anything out that we needed to say, and then have the opportunity to lock back in and say, like, look, we have a chance to win an Olympic medal, have something to take with us forever and be etched in the history books. And so you say that, and you know how important it is, but at the same time, you're still pretty hungover from the loss that was just last night, right? And so unfortunately or fortunately, we've had a similar experience or the same experience in Rio. And so we were able to touch on that. I was able to give my experience in our team chat of, like, I really didn't care in Rio. Like, it wasn't as if I didn't care, but I wasn't up for the game, the bronze medal match, because all I saw was gold. And that was taken from me. And so I was just like, I'm not even here for this. And so it took me about a year after that Rio bronze medal win to be like, oh man, how special is this? To be able to have an Olympic medal around my neck. And I'm so glad I didn't regret, not trying in that game, or not having the same passion for the game in the bronze medal match to win it. So I brought that experience to this bronze medal match and tried to, touch on that for other teammates that hadn't been in that situation. And I'm really proud of the way we came out and responded, because it's such a hard thing to do.
Winning always feels good, I'm sure, but what does it feel like to win an Olympic medal?
It's really hard to, I got chicken skin. It's really hard to grasp it now in the moment. You're just kind of so locked in, and when you're a professional athlete for this long and training with the national team for this long, you kind of just go from one thing to the next and to the next. And so I have to think about my professional season coming up, but at the same time, being able to come home, take a step back, understand how special this is something that is pretty it's an amazing feeling, but it's also pretty fleeting because we have to go right away and lock into the next job. And so I'm very excited to finish the career and be able to sit down and look at all the things that I was able to accomplish, that we as a family, I include my family in all of our accomplishments of like, man, look at all the things that we've done, how far we've come, and a lot of the shiny hardware along the way. It's pretty special, but at the moment, it's hard to really take in.
Well, speaking of, you do have the hardware there, so you should at least put it on.
I was going to let you guys
well, I mean,
you want to put it on?
That's for a little later. I'll probably see if I can borrow it. But, you know, Micah, you mentioned your career and all that, but all eyes now look at LA 28. Yeah. I mean, are you considering that? What are your future plans? Could you see yourself going at another run?
I mean, if they'll have me, I'll be there. If they'll have me, I would love to. I mean, it's in our own backyard in the United States, right? And so I think it's any athlete, especially an Olympic athlete's dream, to be able to finish their Olympic career in their home country in front of so many home fans and friends and family. So yeah, I would love to be there. We are fortunately already qualified because we are the hosts. So there's not a whole lot of grinding that has to be done to qualify. There will still be a ton of grinding to medal and place well. But that's a long way ahead, but I 100% plan on being there.
All right, that's what we want to hear. We want to end with like a few lightning round questions if we can. Just real quick questions, one answer if you can. Stick with it. All right, who was your volleyball idol growing up?
Rafa from Brazil.
Good. First meal that you eat when you come back home to Hawaii?
Poke. Fulan poke.
Right on speed. Most famous person that you saw or got starstruck by when you were in Paris?
Easy answer is any of the basketball guys, but Noah Lyles.
And you played in a lot of countries around the world. What has been the best country to play and the fans to play in front of?
I've played in front of the Filipino fans for the first time this year, and they were insane. But Japan has always been one of my favorite places. So either Japan or the Philippines definitely have like the best fans.
I want to throw one in there. And where do you keep the medal?
I have one from Rio that stays at my parents' house here, and then this one will probably go to the house that we have in California and just sit in a closet.
Oh no, you gotta frame
until
it,
somebody asks to bust it out, and then we just
that's gonna be
dust
like,
it off.
Everyone's gonna want to see it anytime they go to your house.
I would think so.
Yeah, we'll try to display it somehow. I don't know.
Well, Micah, thank you so much for joining us. We know that you have a busy schedule, being back home only for a short time, but we really appreciate it. And thank you for not only representing USA, but representing Hawaii well. I know a lot of people were looking forward to watching you guys play, and you definitely represented the state very well. So thank you very much, and congratulations.
Thank you. It's an honor. Thanks.
We'll be right back right after this.
Spotlight Now with Yunji Denise and Ryan Kalesuji. Connecting you with newsmakers from throughout our islands. Going in depth with Hawaii's leaders and taking your questions live. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Well, great to hear from Micah Christenson as well as our other guests. Of course, we started off our conversation talking with UH President David Lassner, who is ending his tenure at the helm of the University of Hawaii system, talking about some of his accomplishments and some of the things that he's most proud of.
Yeah, and he is looking forward to handing over the keys at the end of the year. Until then, school starts next week, and so he's very excited about that. Interesting to hear his reflections on some of the political fights he's had over the years, but also saying that he is very proud of the work they've done. They've raised records amount of money. And he is also looking forward to the season opener of the UH football game, football season, which happens this Saturday.
That's why we were able to catch up with Craig Angeles, the athletic director, who has been in this position for just about a year now, hearing about some of the challenges that the department continues to face, as well as being able to navigate the ever-changing tides of being in at college athletics. You heard from him about just the amount of money that is now needed within the department with some of the rule changes that have come down from the NCAA that have expanded roster sizes and really have allowed these student athletes to benefit from it. But at some point, there is a price tag to all these scholarships and this money that athletics needs.
Yeah, and you hear about students getting poached, and it makes a lot of sense. You have to think about being 18, 19, 20 years old. The lure at any age, really, of making, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. It's hard to make the pitch then as University of Hawaii. How do you do that? How do you keep them here in Hawaii? Well, one of the things he says is through the support of fans and making them feel that they are loved and supported by their community, which is why he was pushing so hard for people to go see those games in person. Also interesting to hear about UH Manoa and their role in the stadium and his hope that 2028 really is the year.
Yeah, and he said that this is a very crucial time in this process as they look for a developer that they can then begin to work with, but noting that it is a very tight timeline. UH already has a date circled on their calendar of that opening game that they are hoping they will continue to hit that target and see that Aloha Stadium done, and some of, of course, the benefits that will come with having the Aloha Stadium there, not only from recruiting purposes, but of course just the financial side of the institution itself. And of course, we were able to catch up with Micah Christenson. We're going to go back out there and see if we can wear the medal.
And that was so fun and wonderful. I really hope to see him play in Los Angeles. It was wonderful to hear his reflections there. You just really hear how much he loves the game.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people who are hoping to see Micah Christenson back in a USA jersey back in 2028. Join us next week where we're going to be focusing on the relationship with Hawaii and our U.S. military.
We'll see you then.